Welcome back to Trans Guy Reacts. My name is Nick, and I make videos about women's basketball, college, and professional. Today, I want to make a video about The Spy Who Signed Me, which is a 30 for 30 podcast about Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi's experience playing abroad in the Russian league of Spartak. It's pretty much, I'm going to read a lot from the transcripts. I know it's a really long podcast, but I can go through it pretty quick and kind of summarize some things and like react to it. Uh, Before I do that, I just want to say that this channel is really about supporting all women's basketball holistically. I am not here for new fans who are on a bandwagon who only support one team or one player. This is not the channel for you. Please go ahead and dislike this video so I don't show up on your feed anymore. But if you do want to know the history and the nuances of the game and how things work, please go ahead and go ahead, subscribe, and share. Commenting is not allowed on my channel. I don't think it's necessary, and it's a great way for trolls to spam my comment section and bring harm. So I'm not here for that. I'm here to spread information and give context. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into the video. Oh, before that too, also you can tell I'm in a different location. I am living abroad right now, and this is the setup for now. So anyway, let's get back into it. So The Spy Who Signed Me. Yeah, so there's a reporter here named Keith Romer. He's throughout this process talking. I'm not going to say his name every time. I'll probably just say Keith. Keith goes into, after the initial excitement about the WNBA's first few seasons in the late 90s, attendance had started a long, steady decline. The basketball was still great, but the financial pressure had a way of translating directly to the players. Sue Bird: well, we don't make money, right? That was always the vibe to it. Diana Taurasi: $45,000? Like, what? That's what I'm going to make? That's what I'm going to make after 4 years of playing the most prestigious basketball college. That's what I'm going to make. I mean, the janitors are going to make more than me. The guy who takes the floor out and puts it back, he's going to make more than me. Keith: so Sue and Diana looked at each other and to capitalize on their talents. Sue Bird: an agent came to me and was just like, hey, would you be interested in this club in Moscow? And I was like, oh my God, Russia? Like, what? Keith: the offer from the Russian team was making a lot more than what Sue made playing in the States. Sue: I think I was in the 200,000 range. So yeah, for 4 or 5 months, do the math. It's obviously worth it. They played a few seasons under Dynamo, and she hated it. She hated it, and then Spartak happened. Shabti von Kolmanovich, he was the co-owner of the Spartak women's basketball team. Sue's like, there were whispers of this guy Shabti, or Shabtai in Spartak. And the reporter's like, he was born in Lithuania in 1947, and he immigrated to Israel, and before he was unmasked as a spy in 1987 and sent to jail. So Diana's like, you really didn't know what was true and what was, false. So he was like, we had heard stories, and it was just word of mouth. Everything was word of mouth. Next thing we know, they're like, Shopti would like to meet you too. So this dude was in prison, was a Russian spy caught in Israel. He was in jail for a few years apparently, and then was released and went back to Moscow. And this dude is like multinational citizen. He speaks 9 languages, very, very well connected. It's really funny. Diana and Sue kind of describe him as like, he was like a funny looking guy. He was kind of had a Humpty Dumpty body. He was short, but dressed to impress, and he had a curly mullet. Keith: before long, Shopti turned the conversation to just how to deal with Sue and Diana might work. In Europe, teams could only have 2 American players on the court at one time, but Shopti had found a way around that rule, get his American players European passports. Diana: he was the pioneer with the passports, and apparently he gave an American player, a passport of a person who was dead. So someone's walking around with a dead person's passport. This is wild. Keith: because Diana's dad was Italian, she already had a Italian passport. Sue: so D had the Italian passport, I remember for me, the first thing he said was, I heard you're Jewish. And I was like, well, my dad's Jewish, you know? And he was like, okay, I think I can get you an Israeli passport. He picks up the phone, dials some number. It's on speakerphone. Him and some guy are speaking Hebrew. I have no idea. I have like no idea what they're saying. And he's like, okay, gets off the phone. He's like, okay, we're going to make this work. So we're going to get you an Israeli passport. D, already Italian, and you both will play for my club next year. That's wild. He was able just to pick up a phone and make it happen. Keith, depending on bonuses, Sue and Diana were set to make between $400,000 and $1 million each to play half the year for Kamenovic's team Spartak Russian region. In Shopty's first year with Spartak, the team qualified for Europe's highest league in the Euro League, and that is when he went shopping for his new pair of stars, Bird and Taurasi. At first, Sue and Diana's motivations for coming back to Russia were very simple. Diana, the only reason you go there is for money. That is the only reason you leave your country to go to a different country to play basketball. Um, uh, and Keith is like, but Sue and Diana quickly discovered that the perks of playing for Shopty didn't end at their salaries. Sue, everything literally was first class. We're staying at the best hotels. We go to Paris. We're in like the bomb hotel in Paris. Diana, he goes, okay, you two live here in this mini mansion. Sue's like, I mean, it's huge, a pool, a sauna. And we're like, well, take it. Diana's like, this was the beauty about Shopty. The minute you said anything, it was literally taken care of the next day. Sue, I don't know, we were somewhere. All of a sudden, there were like knocks on the door. Everyone got this huge crate of strawberries, like that, were fresh strawberries from like, I don't even know where. Diana, the Slovenian countryside. And we're just like, all right. Sue says he basically was just like, here's my credit card, just go shopping. And Diana's like, yeah, get whatever you want. And Sue's like, yeah, get whatever you want. And we were like very tentative at first. Well, I was. Diana goes, automatically like, okay, can we spend $500? Can we spend $1,000? And you get nervous. You have this adrenaline where you're like, should I get this Louis Vuitton bag that's $3,000, which I would never buy? Yes, I will, and I'll get two of them, one for me and one for Jessica Taurasi. We get in the car, and I mean, we have like 25, 30 bags. I feel like we robbed a bank. That's wild. Diana is just telling like were just giving carte blanche to just buy whatever they wanted and had no repercussions, and he wanted them to do that. Keith. On top of that, Shopty had also recruited one of WNBA's greatest scorers, Tina Thompson. So even Tina Thompson was on this team, who's one of the best. She was like the original logo 3-point shooter and amazing veteran in the league. Diana, she goes, I mean, we were really, really good. Keith, in 2007, that first year with Taurasi and Bird and Thompson, Spartak won the European title. After playing for Spartak, it was hard for Sue and Diana to adjust to playing for their American teams again. Diana, you get back to the WNBA and you're just like lugging all your shit around, getting on a terrible American airline flights at 4:45 a.m. Uh, that air conditioner that's really loud, but all it does is really just make the room like sweatier. That's so funny. Kate Fagan, who's a journalist, kind of talks about it as well. She says, they're taking layovers, you're flying coach, you're staying in hotels that don't have simple room service that you can maybe get a bite to eat at a late hour. It just makes the grind of the season and the wear and tear on their bodies all that more daunting. The amount of emotional toll that has been placed on WNBA players and the amount of pressure to just accept whatever comes to them, because how can you ask for more? Shouldn't you just be lucky to play women's basketball? I mean, there are pressures that have been on them for 2 decades now. So yeah, super true. The league, has rules to this day about the charter flights, and some teams have been fined because they paid for charter flights for their players. Even young players, like rookies, have to double up in their hotel rooms on the road. It's just like incredibly disrespectful to the team, but they're like, well, we don't have any money, so we're not going to spend any money on you guys since you don't make any money. And so you just kind of accept it because you're like, well, I really want to play for the best league in the world. The most prestigious league is the WNBA. So I'll play here for loyalty and pride of of being an American. I guess. Keith. Sue and Diana's lives split neatly in two. In the summer, they would play in the WNBA and earn the maximum salary of around $100K. Once the season ended, they would get ready for Russia. Diana. I was just like, this is what I do. WNBA ends, I get my 7 days to hang out with my family, pack up all my shit, get on that Aeroflot, straight to Moscow. I'm good. So there's like this one flight that leaves ECAT to go to Moscow. Let's say it's at 8 o'clock, and there's no way we're going to make the game, which is at 7. And the next thing you know, it's like the morning of the game, maybe right around shoot around, and they're like, all right, guys, you're going to be able to make your flights tomorrow morning. And we're like, what? How? Shopti called the Aeroflot, he called the airline, and he had the flight moved back 2 hours. A commercial flight. He had a commercial flight moved back 2 hours. So this kind of gives you even more color into how much power and influence this guy had. Keith. In 1987, Kalmanovich was arrested in London for passing millions of dollars worth of false checks. He was allowed to return to Israel to await trial, but while he was there, he was charged by an Israeli court with spying. Within months, he was convicted of espionage and sentenced to 9 years in prison. So it was like on the headlines of every newspaper. It was a great surprise to find that, first of all, that there was a Russian spy in Israel, and secondly, that this Russian spy is the famous Shopti Kalmanovich. Diana. I mean, life is about second chances, right? Shopti want to be more like a convicted spy. He wanted to be more than whatever else people suggest he is. He wanted to be more than that. He was obsessed with basketball and played a large role in individual games. Oh, that's just my interpretation. So from what everyone was saying, is like he just wanted to start over, and he was incredibly obsessed with basketball, and he played a really large role in their individual games, and he kind of like controlled things and was like making choices even over the coaches, so it was kind of funny. Keith. In 2008, Shopti added a third piece to the team from the previous year with Lauren Jackson. So with Jackson and Bird and Taurasi, Spartak wasn't just the best pro team in Europe, it was the best of all time. You just have a super team essentially. In 2008, they won the EuroLeague for the second time, then the third time in 2009. Diana, he took care of us like we were his daughters, which was funny because my mom would call him Papa too. I'd be on the phone with her and she'd goes, "How's Papa doing?" She was like, "You just always knew he was there the way a father would be." Diana, I don't know how many times he would call. "Tomorrow you will be coming to dinner with me and the family and the boys and Anna, or Anna." So he came at it from a sense of family. He really created and cultivated this whole environment where you felt connected. I loved his family. He loved his family, loved women's basketball, loved us, viewed us as performers and entertainers, and wanted to share our talents with the world. And then also he was, I was going to say providing, but he was allowing us to like have a career, make tons of money doing it, and with that you're able to take that home and have a life. Diana, every time we go to an opposing city to play a team, there's always a black SUV with a guy holding a suitcase waiting for him. I mean, every single time, any city that we went to. I don't know what's in that suitcase. Who knows? Maybe it might be shrimp in there. I don't know. There might be $2 million in euros. I don't know. We always saw one side of Shopti. We know there's another side. So this was a guy that wore many hats, and we knew he wore a lot of hats. So I think that's really important to know. Like, Diana and Sue were not ignorant to the situation, and they knew that there were more things going on, but, he was treating them with respect, paying them well, treating them like family. Like, why would they question anything about what he was doing? Keith. When Kalmanovich had gotten started in Moscow, the country was in chaos. The Soviet Union had fallen at the end of '91. Russian capitalism was just 2 years old, and so were all the new laws that were supposed to contain that capitalism. In a country where the police and the courts don't always do a whole lot to protect property rights, Kalmanovich made a killing in construction and real estate. But then November 2nd, 2009, 5 p.m. Diana. We had practice that morning, and it was Janelle McCarville's birthday, so it was a Beyonce concert that night. So the day before, we're like, "Shopti, can we get to the concert?" And he's like, "No problem." He sets it all up. Keith. Sue wasn't in Russia yet. She was rehabbing in the States and planning to come over in January. Diana and the rest of the Spartak players finished up practice and then met up at Shopti's office in Moscow. Diana. And there was this weird feeling, like you just know when there's something wrong. Keith, the doors to Shopti's office, which were always open, were closed that day. Diana, and they're like, "Just wait in the waiting room." And I was like, this is strange, because even if he wasn't there, we'd always go into the office. Keith, after a while, one of the Russian players went over to the drivers to try to figure out what was going on. Diana, and she comes over and she goes, "Shopti has been killed. He was driving to the Kremlin and, was at a stop sign, and someone just came up, and I don't know how many rounds of ammunition they put in there, but they said he just died on sight, really." And it was just silent. No one said a word. I felt like we were just sitting there for days. No one knew what to say. No one knew what to ask. There was just there was just no questions. There was no sense of like, what do we do next? That was just like, this just really happened. Um, Eventually, she went home. She said, like, the driver took her home. Diana's still talking. We get in the car and we're driving back to the house, and we literally drive by the scene. And there, there was what was an hour and a half afterwards, maybe. Everything was still intact. The Mercedes was there for, for a whole careers that for our whole careers that we drove a million times. We were in that car. I can't tell you how many times we were in that car. Gunshots everywhere, just completely shot up. Police, ambulance, and there he was, hunched over dead. Where his belly is kind of where the footrest is. When I saw that, I was in shock. I'd never seen someone dead. No one close to me has ever died. I mean, that was the first time it was like that. A person is dead. So that's super fucked up. Like, finding out that you're the owner of your team who's taking care of you this long, and then having to deal with, like, okay, he's dead, he's just been murdered, and then you go back to your apartment and you go by the crime scene and you see them dead. You see them. You just and I have actually experienced this myself. I have walked by a dead body. Unfortunately, a student in my high school died in a car crash, and I was on the school bus and we drove by the crime scene. So that was terrible. And so I can only understand, but I wasn't as close to this person. And like, imagine like someone you're very close to, and the oddness of being in that car, right? Like, you had been in that car so many times, and then it was shot up. Like, you could have been in that car when it happened, right? You never know. Um, so when Sue gets back to her apartment, she calls Diana in the States to tell her what happened. So this is Sue's perspective. Sue's like, just like that, he's dead. And I'm like, who? And she's like, they killed him. They killed Shabti. I did a very poor thing in that. Later that night, maybe the next day, I Googled. There's some pretty, I don't know, there's some not great pictures on there. There are pictures of him, his white shirts. He always wore white shirts, just all blood. Him laying on the ground, him slumped in the car. It showed the car window where the bullet holes were. And that's when it really hit me. Like, he got murdered like this. Like, this was like a contract killing, because the bullet holes in the window are very, I mean, I don't know how many there were, 30 or 40. They're all like concentrating this one area. Like, this person knew what they were doing. Diana. There's just so many fucked up moments. Like, so they did a huge funeral at the arena, and I go over to one of my Russian teammates and I go, who could have done this? And she goes, the person who killed him is probably here now. And then she moved on to the next conversation. That just like was bizarre to me, but that's Russia is a different world. We had this meeting at the gym with his wife, and she pretty much couldn't guarantee anything. So his wife is Anna. She goes, I come to the girls and tell you know what, I will try to find the money, but if somebody wants to break the contract now, I agree. And Diana's like, she pretty much said, you guys are free to go somewhere else. Anna says, and Diana stood up in this room. She stand up and tell, you know what, I will play until the end of the season for free. And I was crying. Diana, there was just something like I couldn't leave. I just couldn't leave. I couldn't leave. I had this responsibility to him and his family. I just couldn't leave. Sue, I think a lot of the women who play overseas, like, these are just places to go, and they stop there and they play and they get paid and they leave and then they move on to the next. It was so much more to us than that. So much more. Anna, I don't know why, but when Shabti died, I made everything for him for win this championship. Uh, uh, So I think that's really before I move on to what, like, the future of their championship winning, you know, there was an emotional bond. And like Sue was saying, a lot of people don't have that emotional bond with their overseas teams, but they did. They really had this familial connection to this team, and they were willing to play for free because of the situation, right? He'd been given so much to them. They kind of owed Shabti this last run. So Diana goes, that team was just so fucking edgy. Like, there was anger about us when we played. And usually when you play angry, things don't work out well. But for whatever reason, this sadness and this anger and this just unknown feeling of what can we do to make this better, that was our only solution. Keith, Spartak dominated the EuroLeague that year. When the playoffs rolled around, they hadn't lost a single game. Diana, if there's one thing that Shopti always cared about more than anything, it was EuroLeague. He wanted to be champions of Europe. Keith, in the locker room before the championship game against Spain's Ceres, head coach Pokey Chapman didn't even bother with X's and O's. Sue, they used to make these like baseball card ish type things of our team, and she handed one out to every player, and it was just like, I know I don't have to say anything to you guys. It was Shopti's baseball card. We had black uniforms for the first time, and we had all decided to wear these like black high socks, and so everybody stuck their picture of Shopti in their sock. Spartak, Keith goes, Spartak won the European title 87-80. Sue, when that game ended, it was, I didn't know, like this huge dose of like joy and like excitement. It's like this, like, oh, we did it, but very quickly there was like this huge dose of like, the reality that was still hanging over us. Diana, it was a sad day because it was the end of an era, and Shopti wasn't there. He wasn't there to experience it. He made everything bigger than life, and at the time, women's basketball needed someone to make it bigger than life, and that's what he did. I think about what I have in my life now from a financial standpoint, and it's like a large part due to Shabs, and it's like crazy to think about. It's just this one person who took interest in women's basketball, but what would my life be like without that? I could retire and be totally fine, and not a lot of people can say that at 38. And it's because this man provided, myself, the rest of us, this opportunity. So there you go. Diana and Sue are very clear about like the impact that he made and actually respecting and giving women's basketball a platform. Kate Fagan, the way we treat female athletes here is disrespectful. We should be embarrassed that the best experience that Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird have where they felt most respected was by apparently an ex-KGB officer who was eventually shot dead outside the Kremlin. He treated our female athletes with more respect than they've ever felt domestically. Like that. That's quite an interesting legacy to actually try to understand. Keith, if he were, a mafia figure, like, what would that mean to you as a player? Sue, I don't know. It's like if you presented me with facts that, he was like out there murdering people and like doing, that would be hard to detach from. So yeah, I don't know if it would be hard because he did mean so much to us in all these other ways, and we never saw anything like that. Never. Diana, I can only go from how he treated me. I could only go on the basis of how he helped my career, and that's all easy for me to say right now because he did nothing but help me. So would it be ignorant for me to be like, oh, I wouldn't change my perception of him at all? I don't know. I don't know if it would tell him if it would to tell you the truth. The good person in me says, yeah, of course it would. I should feel different. I don't know if I would, though. I really don't. So I just want to point that out. There's nuances to this. Sue and Diana understand that he may have not been the most perfect person, but he never treated them badly. He never showed any signs that he was a bad person. It was just the politics of Russia at the time. Yeah, and then as a side note of all of this, Diana and Sue continue to play in Russia. They just continue to play with the opposing team on UMMC, and that's the team that had like Candace Parker and Dewana Bonner, and even that team still kind of like treated them really well, paid them extravagant amounts of money, had personal trainers, personal translators, private jets, luxury living, bonuses, and so much so that in 2015, they asked Diana Taurasi to sit out the WNBA season and paid her close to $3 million to do so for her health and so that she would be healthy for the next coming season. And she did it. It's like, why wouldn't she, right? Incredible financial opportunity. Like the WNBA is paying you $100,000, and if you sit out the season, you're going to make close to $3 million. No brainer. The NBA players, they don't have to make these decisions because the league is much older than the WNBA, and they have the revenue to support their players. NBA rookies make about $1.5 million a year. The bench warmers, so far more than the women's league. But you have to think about that again. It's a young league, and with time it will grow. And then now you have the Caitlin Clark effect, it's really Angel Reese, because Angel Reese really made Caitlin Clark who she is today, and the media painting Angel Reese as a villain really blew up Caitlin Clark's stock. But all those new eyeballs, the love for South Carolina, all of these freshmen in the NCAA. I think this is a moment for the WNBA to grow and to build on its brand. And I really hope that the WNBA marketing team is doing well by this new influx of talent and eyeballs. And I hope that they're more proactive instead of reactive as they've been in the past. So we will see. Time will tell. But yeah, that's what I wanted to share about Sue and Diana's experience in playing in Russia. If you're interested in that podcast, I would say go listen to it. It's probably far more interesting than me talking about it, but this is a great summary because the podcast is like an hour long and I did this in like 25 minutes. So if you really enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.